Welcome to our weekly Africa update. Today we're talking about Nigeria and the United States. We're talking about the Venezuela and the United States. We're talking about Tanzania, lastly. But mostly it's about the US, and the US, and you will understand why. But before that, peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people, those at home, those abroad, and those in the future. If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution, and this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is in the mind. So once again, receive our revolutionary greetings from the African Continental Unity Party. My name is King Kabbalah. Always happy to have you on our weekly rendezvous, and precisely on this Africa update, where we're talking about some major issues around the world that affect the world globally, but also affect us as African people, and how we can understand them. Because, as you know, the Western propaganda is very powerful, that it tries to disfigure all the events in the world to convince us about their own ideology, which is about our destruction and our impoverishment. So it is our duty to work in analyzing, interpreting some of these issues in the right way, so that our people understand what is happening in the world and where lies the path towards our freedom and our emancipation. So today, the major issues that we are discussing that have been developing recently, or precisely last week and this week as well, are concerning Nigeria and the United States, Venezuela and the United States, and of course, we'll end with what happened in Tanzania. Beginning with the United States and Nigeria, we have heard recently that the United States has threatened Nigeria with the military actions because Nigerian government is not doing something to protect Christians who are being persecuted in Nigeria by Muslim or some extremist fractions of Islam in Nigeria. But the analysis that we want to analyze here, so that we understand this whole thing from an Afrocentric perspective and from a revolutionary perspective. To begin with, I want to say something that's the that Dr. John Henry Clark said, so that we lay the ground of how we do our analysis. And Dr. John Henry Clark said that anything that Europeans give or do for you, even if apparently it's for your own good, is precisely to facilitate their domination and exploitation of you. They've never done anything to empower you or to make you stronger than they are, because simply the logic is simple. Because anybody who is strong than you cannot teach you how to get rid of his influence or his domination over you. So that's the ground we lay there, to understand that whatever speech that the American president is making in the name of protecting or defending Christians in Nigeria is not meant to defend or to protect, even to empower the Nigerian people or the Christians in Africa. Is mostly about facilitating their domination, their oppression, the exploitation of African people, precisely of what Nigeria has under the ground. That's very important, because as we're speaking right now, Christians are being persecuted all across Africa, in Congo, in east part of the DRC. The millions of people who have died there are mostly Christians, and we know that the killing that taking place there is taking place with the help of the United States of America, and we don't see the president of America or the American government to get mobilized to serve Christians over there. Christians are being killed in West Africa, in Mali, in Burkina Faso. I mean, all across Africa, there are a lot of people who are being killed who belong to the Christianity as a religion. So we would have liked to see this kind of enthusiasm or excitement by the United States to protect and defend Christians over there, but we don't see that, and we know this is fact. This underlying issue here than protecting Christians. Mostly, it's about the oil or the the wealth of Nigeria that is at stake as we're speaking right now, not even about serving Christians. And the second thing that I want to argue here, very important, is that there was a poll done by International Poll a couple of years ago, and the question was, who is the biggest or who is the greatest threat to world peace in today's time? And guess who was on the top of the list? The United States of America was, in the opinion of many people in the world, because this poll was done internationally, the United States is seen by many people, by the majority of the people in the world, as the greatest threat to world peace, right? And after the United States, the second country was Pakistan. But the difference between the two countries was huge. Uh, United States was voted with 24% as the greatest threat to world peace, while Pakistan only with 8%. But we understand Pakistanese case because it's more about the Indian votes. When you have 2 million of Indians voting that Pakistan is the greatest threat, then it makes sense. But the most important thing is that the United States is the greatest threat to world peace. Or, if I have to use the words of Noam Chomsky, the U.S. government is the greatest terrorist organization in the world today. The absence of peace in the world today is the result of the United States. If we have war in Central Africa, if there's a war in Sudan, if there's a war in East Africa, if there's a war in Middle East, if there's a war in Ukraine, it's simply because of the United States, because the United States is the greatest threat to peace in the world, or the greatest terrorist organization in the world today is the US government. So we don't have to be deceived with this propaganda about saving Christians. I think the peace in the world is threatened by the military actions of the United States of America, which happen throughout the world and unauthorized by the countries in which it happens. So this is the truth that we have to keep in mind. The second update that we have today is about Venezuela. Venezuela, as well as Colombia, are being threatened by the American dictatorship, the American hegemony. As we're speaking right now, there's not drone assassination campaign as it was done by Obama, but actually the warship of the United States Navy force has been moved into Latin America, right closer to Venezuela. And there have been about 47 attacks, missile attacks, right, targeting what the Americans have called the narco traffickers. But we don't know because those people have never judged. There's no proof showing that those people who were killed were actually narco traffickers. And this is very worrying because we know the bottom line of this is to reverse the order in Venezuela, to depose the government of Venezuela, championed by Nicolas Maduro's. That is what the Americans are aiming for, in order to have their hand on the oil, the rich oil of Venezuela. You may or may not agree with me, but I think history is what teaches us more here about the intention of the United States of America in Venezuela. Now, if you look at the end of the Second World War, you will see some policies that were drafted. And most importantly, I'm talking about what was called the National Security Memorandum 68, in the document in which the Americans were dividing the world because they were the biggest winner of the Second World War. So they were dividing the world in different pieces. There's a part of the world that was called the Grand Area, in which Africa found itself. And there's a part of the world that was called our backyard, and that is Latin America. So the whole Latin America was considered to be the backyard of the United States, which means they can move in, do whatever they want to do, and nobody can judge them and nobody can condemn them for whatever they do. And they've been doing that. When you look at what Americans did in Panama, what Americans did in Mexico, Cuba, and all those Latin American countries, you will see that, I mean, they've been doing atrocious activities there. supporting tyranny in those countries that have led to thousands of people being of lives being destroyed, just because America want to keep control of that, what they've called the backyard. So, in other words, any leader in those countries must be lenient towards American foreign policy, which all is about privatization of state entities and capitalist exploitation and no really valuable return to the population. But when you go to Venezuela, you will see that this is a country that has been led by people who want to really work for the citizens, which Americans will call socialism or communism. But in reality, these are the governments who have been putting their energy, their resources to benefit their people, who have been nationalizing the resources so that the resources really belong to the people of the country. And the like of Venezuela uh, is what we're talking about here, because it didn't start with Maduro. You must remember, it started with Hugo Chavez, who was resisting against Western imperialism in that part of the world because he didn't want to be a backyard of the American imperialism. And this is the same guideline that Nicolas Maduro is working on. And unfortunately, there's a tyrant in the White House who want to destroy anything that is not complying with the American foreign policy, or to say American hegemonic dictatorship in the world. This is what is happening here. And the bottom line is to get their hands on the oil reserve of Venezuela and to exploit it. That's it. That is what is happening. So there's nothing about drugs, drug cartels, so forth and so on, because we know that the CIA is the biggest drug dealer in the world. We know the CIA is the biggest drug dealer in the world. There's nothing that Europeans today can tell the rest of the world about narco trafficking. Whether you talk about the British, those are the ones who were pushing opiums in China, right? Whether you talk about the US, the drug cartel, the biggest drug cartel in the world is the CIA, right? So there's no way that the Americans will convince the world today that Nicolas Maduro is a drug trafficker or is supporting drug cartels in Latin America. This is not the truth. The truth is about the oil of Venezuela, which America want to put their hands on and exploit and leave the people of that country destitute, impoverished, just as much as the people of other areas or other parts of the world where Americans have been controlling their resources or have been present. Well, the last thing that I want us to discuss is about the elections in Tanzania, and we saw what happened in Tanzania. I think the biggest question here is what the African Union does, because when there's a coup d'etat in Africa, we see African Union condemning those who perpetrate coup d'etat in Africa, sanctioning them. But when there's what we call constitutional coup d'etat, whereby a current leader uh, arrest all the opposition parties or actually exclude them from participating in the elections, so that the leader participate himself or herself in the elections and get elected with 98%. We don't know from where, because the majority of the people seem to be not happy with the leader. Then that 98%, we don't know where it comes from. And that is on itself a constitutional coup d'etat. And we would have loved to see the African Union standing up and sanctioning these type of leaders. But what we realize is that the African Union is a club, is a circus, is a club of leaders who defend themselves regardless of how atrocious their actions are on the populations. They cannot blame themselves, they cannot punish themselves, they have to protect themselves. But when there is a revolution taking place to overthrow the regime in order to put in place a regime that responds to the needs and the desires of the people, there you see the African Union with sanctions, with condemnations, with so forth and so on. So this is for us, the younger generation in Africa, or those who call themselves the Gen Zs, to understand that the only justice that we can expect in this world, or the only arbitration that we can expect to give us justice, is that which we put in place ourselves. We are no longer at that time where we have to expect change, significant change to come from the African Union, which is a club of tyrants and dictators who are there to protect and defend themselves. So we are on our own as the young people today. And because we are the future of Africa, we have to stand up and to seize the opportunity of manufacturing the future that we want for ourselves. That means we have to form our own African Union of youth, of African youth. We have to form our own governmental system of African youth in order to replace the current leaders. And if you wonder how we can do that, I will invite you to look into the African Continental Unity Party, a movement that we have been doing for a couple of years now. This is a intergenerational project that we want all African young people, all the Gen Z, to join us so that we can together bring about the change that we want, because that change will never going to come from the African Union or from the European Union or from the UN. Is the change that we need to bring into existence by ourselves, because we are the ones who suffer. We are the ones who see all these atrocities, and we are the one who can come up with a solution to all these things. So peace and love, freedom and decolonization to all African people, those at home, those abroad, and those in the future. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.